My daughter laughed first. Her husband followed. They mocked my shaking hands in front of a room full of guests. Said I looked like a bobblehead with soup service. I stood there, 74, joints on fire, heart cracked clean down the middle. That was the moment I decided. If my arthritis made me the punchline at my own table, then those hands, trembling and tired, would be the same ones to erase them from my will. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Steam curled upward in gentle ribbons from the bowls arranged across Marge Delaney's antique walnut table, the scent of rosemary and slow-simmered chicken broth warming the space like a second fireplace. Outside, the wind rustled the mountain trees. Inside, the polished hardwood floors creaked beneath heels and loafers as guests took their seats. Wine glasses catching glints of overhead light. Marge, ever the quiet host, moved with care. At 74, grace had become her armor. Deliberate, practiced, proud. Her joints ached as always, but her rhythm remained steady as she lifted the final bowl of her homemade wild rice soup. She turned toward the table, hands cradling the ceramic just so. Then it happened. A tremor, a twitch. The soup shivered in the bowl, a few golden drops tipping over the edge and pattering onto the runner. "Oh," Carter's voice sliced through the soft clatter of silverware. A splash of wine, a splash of soup. Performance art. A smattering of laughter bubbled from the table. Polite. Awkward. Bethany didn't miss a beat. She dabbed at her lip with a napkin, smiling thinly. "She's like a human bobblehead, isn't she?" She nudged Carter's elbow, grinning. Only mine came with soup service. More laughter now. Fuller. Looser. As if mocking an old woman's tremor was fair game once the wine flowed and the host didn't object. Marge said nothing. She placed the bowl in front of Ellie, her 16-year-old granddaughter, eyes wide and unblinking. Then slowly returned to the kitchen. Her hands trembled at her sides. Not from shame or rage, but from the disease that had long since made peace with her bones. She didn't cry, didn't glare. She refilled the pitcher of lemon water with quiet precision, the slice of citrus catching under her fingernail as she turned the glass. Ellie caught her eye as she returned. Lips moved silently. "I'm sorry," Marge gave the faintest nod and resumed her seat. Bethany had already redirected the conversation to her boutique's expansion, rattling off buzzwords like upscale minimalism and influencer synergy, her voice loud enough to drown out the soup incident entirely. To everyone else, the moment had passed. To Marge, it lodged itself deep, like a splinter under the nail. Carter poured himself another glass of wine, his arm brushing Bethany's shoulder as he whispered something that made her stifle a giggle. Marge didn't need to hear it. The joke had already been made. Her tremor, her body, her dignity, all reduced to punchlines at her own table. She cleared the dishes after the last of them left, her motions slow but sure. Donnie, her neighbor, had offered to stay and help, but she'd waved him off. She needed solitude now, the kind only late-night silence could provide. The house felt colder once they were gone. She wiped down the countertops, folded the linens, set the wine glasses upside down on the rack. Her bones protested each reach and lift. As she moved to collect the last dish, her gaze wandered upward. There it was, the soup bowl, clean, dry, and placed high on the top shelf above the stove, out of reach, deliberately so. She hadn't put it there. She couldn't have. She stepped closer, stretching as far as her stiff joints allowed, the tips of her fingers grazing the lip of the ceramic. A cruel, childish move, one meant to remind her of what she could no longer do. Bethany or Carter, maybe both, had tucked it there as a final note to the evening's cruel humor, a silent, mocking echo. Marge stepped back, spine straightening as far as it would go. She stared at the bowl, her expression unreadable. Then she turned out the kitchen light, and in the quiet dark of her Asheville mountain home, surrounded by the scent of thyme and chicken stock, Marge made a decision, not with fury, not with vengeance, but with calm, aching certainty. She would not forget tonight, and she would not forgive it. Marge sat at her roll-top desk just after midnight, the house creaking softly around her as the mountain wind tapped at the window panes, like a ghost still waiting for permission to speak. A mug of chamomile had gone cold beside her. The lamp's amber light fell in a tight circle over the open journal, casting long shadows across the uneven page. Her right hand trembled as she gripped the pen. The bones in her fingers felt brittle, pulsing. Still, she wrote, March 8th, Bethany's birthday. Homemade soup, roasted vegetables, lemon tart. Guests arrived at 5:30. Carter joked about my tremor, said I was performing abstract art. Bethany called me a bobblehead. Guests laughed. I said nothing. Ellie saw it. She mouthed, I'm sorry. The soup bowl was later placed too high for me to reach. Deliberate. Humiliating. The words were uneven. The ink bled where her fingers shook too hard. She didn't cross out the mistakes. She let them stay. Each stroke of the pen a testimony. Each wobble a scar. She reached for her phone, hands stiff, and opened the photo she'd taken just before the party. The table was perfectly set, sunlight catching the glint of her mother's old silverware. Soup bowls nested neatly beside folded napkins. She printed it from her small desktop printer and taped it above the entry, proof that the evening had started with care. By the time she'd finished, her knuckles were inflamed, skin tight, and pink across her joints. She wrote that down too. Pain level, 6. Location, both hands. Trigger, stress. The old habit of documentation, born from years of managing arthritis, now served another purpose. Evidence. She closed the journal slowly and slid it into the bottom drawer, placing a small wooden box over it for weight. Her fingers curled around the drawer handle for a moment before letting go. Morning light stretched thin across the porch as Donnie Chase knocked once, then let himself in. He knew better than to wait. For 30 years, he'd been the kind of neighbor who brought coffee in silence and asked questions only when it mattered. He carried 2 thermoses and a brown paper bag. Coffee, scones. Don't argue, Marge didn't smile. She opened the porch screen and led him inside, her pace slower than usual. He noticed her hands right away. What did they say this time? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the drawer, pulled out the journal, and opened to the page with the taped photo. Her hands shook as she handed it to him. Donnie read in silence, jaw tightening. He flipped the page, then looked up at her. It's time. Marge exhaled slowly, a sound that was almost a sigh, but not quite. She reached for the landline phone on the counter, fingers hovering over the keypad like it was the lever to something irreversible. Donnie took a sip of his coffee. You want me to be there when you make the call? No, she said, but I'll need you tomorrow. The phone beeped as she dialed. 1 ring, 2. A crisp voice picked up. Cynthia Eng speaking. Marge's voice didn't tremble, even if her hands did. I'd like to revise my documents. Now, on the other end, there was a pause, not of hesitation, but recognition. Cynthia answered with quiet resolve. Come in first thing. I'll clear the schedule. Marge hung up, turned to Donnie, and nodded once. In the distance, a crow landed on the porch railing, cocking its head toward the glass. A cold draft slipped under the door as if the house itself had heard the decision and braced for what would come next. The estate binder sat where she'd left it 5 years ago, top shelf of her bedroom closet, behind a stack of flannel quilts and a yellowing road atlas no one had used since GPS came along. Marge reached for it with slow determination, her fingers curling carefully around the thick spine. Dust bloomed into the air as she pulled it free. It smelled like linen, old wood, and time. She carried it to the kitchen table, set it down like something fragile. The leather cover was worn, but the clasp still clicked open with authority. Inside, labeled dividers, plastic sleeves, notarized documents tucked neatly in place. Her handwriting, sharp and curling, lined the margins of older drafts. She flipped to the section marked Last Will and Testament. Bethany Harmon, co-executor. Carter Harmon, co-executor. Beneficiaries. 100% split. Between the two, Marge's mouth twitched. Not a frown, not quite a smile, just a memory surfacing like sediment in stirred water. She turned another page and saw the emergency instructions in Carter's handwriting, hastily added in blue ink. Transfer funds ASAP. Secure property. Notify Ellie if minor. She remembered letting him write that line. It had felt generous at the time, inclusive. Now it felt like an invitation to a theft she'd narrowly escaped. By 9:05 a.m., Marge was sitting in Cynthia Ng's office, a converted craftsman house on Montfort Avenue, white siding and a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Inside, it smelled of legal pads and lemon polish. The floorboards creaked under Marge's boots, and she welcomed the sound. It felt honest. Cynthia came out from the back room in a navy blouse and gray slacks, glasses perched low. She smiled warmly as she extended her hand. "Marge, you look resolute." "I am," Marge said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were trembling against her coat. They sat in the sunlit office, binder between them. Cynthia opened it gently, scanning the pages like she already suspected what was coming. "Tell me what changed," she said, pen poised. "Nothing changed," Marge replied, folding her hands in her lap. "They just showed me who they are." Cynthia nodded once and began jotting notes in shorthand. "We'll revoke co-executorship. Remove them entirely, and I'd like to recommend a no-contest clause." Marge tilted her head. "Explain it." "If they try to challenge the will, they forfeit everything. Even if they win on some technicality, they still lose the right to inherit." Marge considered that. "Good. We'll also include a citation for elder ridicule." "Can we prove that?" Cynthia's eyes didn't blink. "We don't have to. It's a protective clause, but we can point to evidence. Digital communications, witness statements, medical documentation showing the emotional toll." She paused. "You still have your journal?" Marge nodded. "Perfect. That'll be gold." The front door creaked open without warning, and Donnie stepped inside holding 2 folders and a thermos under one arm. "I thought you might need a second set of hands," he said, walking straight to the conference table. "You're early," Marge said. "I figured you'd be earlier." Donnie handed over a folder. Copies of her prescriptions, mobility reports, arthritis evaluations going back 4 years. "I made backups." Cynthia glanced between them, clearly impressed. "You'd make a fine executor, Donnie." "I accept," he said without pause, "and I'll witness whatever needs witnessing." Marge smiled, small, grateful, but real. Then it settled. They spent the next hour marking changes, initialing margins, scanning pages. The air felt thick with dust and resolve. Every clause rewritten felt like a stone laid in the foundation of something Marge had decided to build. Not revenge, not exactly. More like a wall. A quiet, legal wall with no cracks and no apologies. Just as they were finishing, Marge's phone vibrated on the table, from Carter Harmon. Subject: Sunday slosh, LOL. "Hope your soup survived the spill zone." Marge stared at the screen. Her hand didn't shake. "Print that," Cynthia said softly. "We'll add it to the file." The air in Cynthia Ng's office smelled faintly of ink and cedar oil. The windows cracked just enough to let in the early spring breeze rolling off the mountains. Sunlight spilled across the long oak conference table where Marge sat. Spine straight, eyes steady, hands trembling slightly as she reached for the pen. The revised will lay before her like a final performance. Not a curtain call, a reclamation. "Let's go through it line by line," Cynthia said, her tone crisp but compassionate. She tapped the first page. "As of this date, all previous wills are revoked in full. Carter and Bethany Harmon are removed as beneficiaries and co-executors." Marge didn't blink. "Proceed." Cynthia flipped the page. "All assets, home, savings, annuities, and insurance are to be placed into an educational trust. 100% in favor of one Ellie Harmon, to be dispersed incrementally until her 30th birthday. Donnie, sitting beside her in a charcoal fleece vest and corduroy slacks, nodded without a word. And the trust, Cynthia continued, will be managed by Mr. Donald Chase, who will also serve as both your healthcare proxy and successor trustee, should you become incapacitated. Are you still comfortable with that arrangement? Marge glanced at Donnie. His hands were folded in front of him, calm as still water. Completely, she said. Cynthia's pen slid across the next page. We've added a detailed clause for protection. In the event that either Bethany or Carter attempts to contest the will, they are automatically disqualified from receiving any part of your estate, including sentimental or physical property. Marge tilted her head. That includes the lake cabin, Cynthia nodded. It does now. Donnie leaned back slightly, voice low. What about the part about why? Cynthia's fingers tapped the table once before she slid a single printed paragraph forward. This is what we'll file as an attached exhibit. Language includes phrases like pattern of elder ridicule, exploitive communication, and emotional distress in the presence of guests. We have copies of Carter's email, your journal entry, and Donnie's witness statement backing the timeline. Marge reached for the pen. Her hand shook slightly, but she didn't hesitate. The tip touched the page. She signed. First name, last name, date. Then again on the trust documents. Again on the healthcare directive. Each stroke was deliberate, a quiet defiance. Not shaky with fear, but strong in spite of pain. The pen dragged across the page like a plow through earth, carving legacy into legality. When she finished, the notary, a silver-haired woman in a windbreaker and pink Nikes, stepped forward and stamped the final page with a practiced press. You got this, she said, giving Marge a small, approving nod. Donnie let out a breath. That sound, he muttered, gesturing to the seal, is the sound of doors closing. Marge rose slowly, her knees stiff from sitting too long. She looked down at the thick stack of papers, her name on every page, her choices, signed in ink. Cynthia stood with her. They won't see it coming. They don't need to, Marge said. They've already earned it. She left the office with Donnie at her side, the binder tucked beneath her arm like a shield. They walked to the parking lot in silence, the wind tugging at the hem of her coat. Overhead, the sky was a bright, cloudless blue, the kind that made even hard decisions feel like progress. That night, Marge poured herself a glass of water and settled onto the porch. The mountain stood tall in the fading light, and the archaic rocking chair creaked beneath her like an old song. The kitchen was clean. The soup bowls were put away, all of them within reach. Her phone buzzed. Bethany Harmon tagged you in a memory. Photo caption. Good hands still make good pie, right, Mom? The image showed Marge years ago, flour on her cheeks, Ellie beside her at the counter, both laughing. The memory itself was warm, but coming now? It was a jab. Marge tapped the screen, saved the photo, and opened her evidence folder. Then she added the tag. Timing. After will executed. Public manipulation attempt. The final trust document was 3/4 of an inch thick, printed on premium bonded paper with watermarks and margin stamps that made it feel more like a manuscript than a financial directive. Cynthia slid the final copy across the polished conference table, her expression sharp, proud. The air in the office had shifted. From preparatory to permanent. This version, Cynthia said, tapping her pen twice against the cover, cannot be touched, reinterpreted, or undone. It's airtight. All assets retitled, the house, the annuity, every savings certificate, account, and deed. You are now legally insulated. Marge didn't speak. She reached for the pen again, the same one they'd used for the will. Her fingers slow, precise. Every movement came with effort, but it also came with purpose. She signed on the final page, then again on the trust's companion schedule, and once more on the property transfer sheet. Donnie watched closely from the corner chair, reading glasses perched low, fingers drumming lightly on his khaki slacks. That's the last one, Cynthia nodded. And we've officially deposited the first contribution into Ellie's educational trust. $40,000, funded, sealed, and scheduled for growth. Marge looked up from the papers. She'll be able to choose where she goes? She'll be able to choose who she becomes, Cynthia replied. Outside the window, wind rattled the dogwood trees. Marge could feel the pressure in her joints start to swell. The day's exertion already asking for repayment. She clenched and released her fingers beneath the table, slow breathing steadying her. It was worth it. Meanwhile, Carter Harmon was staring at his phone several miles away, sitting in the corner booth of a craft burger place near downtown. He was trying to log into Marge's online banking app, something he'd done a dozen times over the years when she needed help sorting out online stuff. But now, access denied. Account locked. He tried again. Same result. He texted Bethany. Can't get in. She must have changed it. You say anything to her lately? Marge, back in Cynthia's office, had already anticipated the fallout. I want them to try, she said quietly. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. You want them to? They've never been careful. If they try to push, I want it documented. Donnie tapped the side of his folder. We should get ahead of it. Something visual. Proof she's of sound mind and capable. Marge turned to him, eyes narrowing with curiosity. You want me to take a selfie holding the deed? No, he said, smiling faintly. Your handwriting, a fresh sample. Let's document it with a dated statement. Something only you would write. Cynthia slid a legal pad across the table. Go ahead, Marge. Say whatever you want. Marge took the pen slowly. Her fingers curled awkwardly, but her grip was firm. She began writing in large, deliberate letters. I knew what I was doing. Every decision, every word, every change, I chose. They mocked my hands, but I used them. And I am not done yet. The pen shook, but the message didn't. Donnie read it once. Perfect. By the time they left the office, the sun was dipping low, gold light turning the streets of Asheville syrupy and soft. The town was between rush hours, between seasons, quiet in a way that felt personal. Back home, Marge put on a kettle, unlaced her shoes, and stood for a long moment in front of her pantry shelf. Soup bowls all sat within reach now, a small shift with heavy meaning. The doorbell rang just after 6. Through the front window, she saw Bethany's SUV in the drive. The one Carter always joked was more about brand than terrain. Her daughter stood on the porch in a powder blue coat, bottle of wine in one hand and a gift bag in the other. Her makeup was light, but deliberate. Marge opened the door, holding it just enough. Bethany tilted her head, smiling a little too brightly. You've been so quiet lately. Everything okay? The wine bottle Bethany held was unopened, but her tone already carried the sweetness of forced civility. I thought we could have a little mother-daughter catch-up, she said, as she stepped inside without waiting. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor, each step too casual to be sincere. Marge offered a smile, not warm, not cold, just enough to keep the peace. Tea's on. Hope chamomile still works for you, Bethany gave a light, insincere laugh. Well, I'm more of a matcha girl these days, but sure. Tea sounds cozy. In the kitchen, the kettle began to whistle. Marge moved slowly, deliberately, pouring hot water into 2 ceramic mugs with lemon slices already nestled at the bottom. The citrus steam curled between them. Bethany didn't touch hers. Instead, she leaned against the counter, scanning the room with the subtle precision of someone hunting for something that wasn't hers yet. Her eyes drifted over the shelves, the corner drawers, the neat little desk with envelopes stacked and labeled by date. She didn't comment, but her gaze lingered long enough to say everything she wouldn't out loud. New file system? Bethany asked, nodding toward the desk. Helps me keep track of my garden notes, Marge replied smoothly. It's nearly compost season. Bethany tilted her head, trying to read through the veneer. You've been organizing a lot lately. I like a clean spring, Marge said, handing her a mug. From the living room window, Donnie sat with a crossword in his own front room, glancing discreetly at the clock on his wall. He noted the time, 6:13 p.m. Bethany had arrived in a coat that looked more curated than warm. He scribbled the time down in the margin of the newspaper. In Marge's kitchen, silence filled the space between sips of tea. "I saw you were tagged in that pie photo," Bethany said lightly, watching her mother's face. "I did," Marge answered, blowing gently over her mug. "You didn't like it." "I didn't dislike it either," Bethany cracked her knuckles. "You've been a little reserved lately." "I've been busy." "With what?" "Letters, recipes, sorting through some old paperwork." Marge met her daughter's eyes now, steady and unflinching. "Things I should have looked at a long time ago." Bethany blinked, but recovered quickly. "Well, Carter and I just want to make sure you're not overdoing it. You've always been independent, but—" Her voice trailed off as she opened a kitchen drawer, pretending to look for a spoon but clearly scanning for paperwork. Marge didn't stop her. Let her look. There was nothing in that drawer but tea bags and a coaster from Yellowstone they'd never visited. The drawer closed. Bethany took a slow sip, her eyes scanning once more. At 6:37, Donnie marked the time of her departure. 33 minutes. Not a minute wasted. Inside, as soon as the door clicked shut, Marge reached for her phone. She typed a simple text to Cynthia. "Marge, she's sniffing." Cynthia's reply came seconds later. "Cynthia, let her. We documented everything. Let the silence work." A ping landed in Marge's inbox an hour later, from Carter. The subject line read, "Helpful read, signs of senior independence slipping." Inside was a link to an article from some Aging with Dignity site, featuring bullet points on diminished cognition, forgetfulness, and resistance to assistance. Marge didn't reply. She dragged the email into her digital evidence folder and labeled it. Intent to undermine capacity, Phase 1. The next day, Ellie arrived alone, under the pretense of helping with a school essay. She moved quickly, dropping her backpack by the dining table, eyes flitting toward the hallway like she was waiting for someone to follow. When Marge asked her if she was okay, Ellie hesitated. Then, wordlessly, she pulled a folded scrap of paper from her sleeve and handed it over. In her careful handwriting, Ellie had written, "They said you'll be settled soon." I don't know what that means, but I'm scared Marge folded the note without a word. Her tea had gone cold again. The scrap of paper Ellie left behind sat tucked inside Marge's day planner, folded so many times its creases had begun to fray. "They said you'll be settled soon." The word had festered overnight, ambiguous, patronizing, and chilling. Settled like a dispute, settled like land, settled like a burden removed. By 8:10 the next morning, Marge was sitting stiffly on the exam table at the rheumatology center off Charlotte Street, the familiar scent of alcohol wipes and linoleum wax filling her nose. Her knuckles throbbed in the cool air. She didn't flinch. Dr. Patel adjusted her glasses as she flipped through Marge's file. "Your inflammation markers are stable. Joint deterioration slow for your age. Still tracking your mobility?" "Daily," Marge said. She pulled out her weathered pain journal, every page filled with handwritten notes, pressure points, weather shifts, days with less tremor, days with more. "Add this to the file," Dr. Patel raised her brows. "You want this documented officially?" "I want everything documented." 10 blocks away, her next appointment ran on time. Dr. Kerr, her longtime therapist, offered a quiet space and softer questions. "How have your days felt lately?" "Sharp," Marge said, "and clear." When asked to complete a capacity screening, Marge flew through it, reciting addresses, recalling sequences, naming governors and childhood pets. When Kerr asked why she was pursuing new documentation, she answered plainly, "Some people think I'm easier to move than furniture." By noon, her files had 2 new entries: full mental capacity and uncompromised judgment. Marge left both appointments with signed letters and digital scans. She slid the printouts into her binder without emotion. Later that afternoon, Ellie helped her rinse strawberries in the sink, while the kitchen radio hummed a 1960s folk ballad. Mom said the house will be hers someday, Ellie said softly. Marge dried her hands on a checkered dish towel and smiled without turning around. Then she's dreaming. There was no venom in her voice, just a quiet understanding of entitlement misplaced. In the evening, Donnie came over with his laptop, a portable scanner, and 2 thumb drives. Everything physical needs a backup, he said, setting up at the kitchen table. Cloud storage, external drive, off-site copy in my gun safe. Marge handed him each file like a museum archivist. The trust, the will, the evaluations, the signed statement about her mental clarity. Each document slid through the scanner with a soft mechanical hum. How many people do you think go through this? She asked. Not enough, Donnie said. Most people never expect their own kids to try to bury them before they're dead. When the last page was uploaded, Donnie clicked save on 3 drives, labeling each carefully in black ink. You've built yourself a legal fortress, he said. Marge poured him a bourbon without asking. Good. The next morning, she updated Cynthia via encrypted email. In response, Cynthia called instead of writing back. They'll ramp up now, she warned. You've cut off their future cash flow, and they know it. Let them ramp, Marge said. No, listen to me, Cynthia replied. Her voice, usually measured, was urgent now. Be unreadable. Don't tip your hand, not with them. Let them guess. Let them underestimate Marge, leaned against the counter, the phone warm against her cheek. I've done that my whole life. Good, Cynthia said. Now weaponize it. The call ended, and Marge stood still for a long moment, watching the morning sun slant across her porch railing. The birds were out, blue jays mostly, loud and unbothered. She envied them. No one ever tried to settle a bird. The landline rang again just after 10. She answered it calmly, already expecting the name on the caller ID. Hi, Mom, Bethany said, tone syrupy with performance. Carter and I were thinking, maybe we should schedule a little family meeting soon, just to talk about the future. Marge laid out a plate of shortbread cookies on the floral china Bethany had once mocked for being too grandma core. The sun filtered through the curtains in soft, buttery streaks. Her hands, wrapped in compression gloves with floral stitching, moved steadily from plate to tray. The doorbell rang at exactly 3 p.m. She opened it to find Bethany first. Heels, perfect posture, smile stretched tight. Carter followed, carrying a white plastic folder under one arm, his sunglasses still perched on his head as if unsure whether this was business or a casual drop-in. Ellie trailed behind them, backpack clutched against her chest like a shield. Her eyes flicked up to Marge, but she didn't say anything. Come in, Marge said, voice gentle. They stepped inside and removed their coats, Bethany offering a well-rehearsed laugh. You've been baking again. It smells homey in here. Just cookies, Marge replied. Nothing too complicated. The table was already set, linen runner, mugs ready for tea. The kettle whistled quietly behind them. Carter placed his folder on the table before the first cookie had even been tasted. So, he said, like a man switching gears in a meeting, we've just been thinking about next steps. Next steps, Marge echoed, pouring tea into the mugs without glancing up. Bethany nodded, sliding into a chair. Just light planning, really. Nothing serious, just a conversation about the future. You've always been so independent, but things happen. Marge offered a serene smile. Of course. Carter opened the folder with a smooth flick. Inside were printed brochures, color-coded, glossy. Phrases like active adult community and transitional living solutions glared from the pages. A few had handwritten notes in the margins. One had a sticky tab. This one has on-site nurse care. He handed one over. Just some places nearby. We thought, just in case, you might want to look. Marge took the paper with steady hands, skimmed the photos, artificial smiles, group yoga, bingo in bright rooms, then set it down beside the cookies. Bethany chimed in, voice wrapped in faux warmth. We only want you comfortable, Mom. I appreciate that, Marge said, taking a sip of tea. No one touched the cookies. Ellie shifted in her chair, eyes down. She hadn't said a word since sitting. Marge turned to her granddaughter. You okay, sweetheart? Ellie looked up. I'm fine. Carter leaned back. We just figured it's easier to talk about this while everything's calm. Not wait for a crisis, you know? Marge nodded slowly. Smart thinking. Encouraged, Bethany leaned in. And maybe, if it's not already done, it would help to update your power of attorney, just so we're prepared to act, should anything happen. I mean, we're closest. It makes sense. I've already handled that, Marge said, still smiling. There was a pause. Brief, sharp, tangible. Bethany blinked. Handled it? I feel very secure, Marge said, her voice silk over steel. Carter tried to recover with a chuckle. Well, sure. But these things are always better with family involved. Marge stood. Your family, she said. But I don't need help with a signature. She collected the brochures from the table and with quiet efficiency, slid them into a file folder marked Other People's Ideas. She didn't discard them. She filed them, indexed and archived like every bad idea ever brought into her home. Ellie finally reached for a cookie. The only one who did. The conversation limped on after that. Small talk, strained chuckles, Bethany commenting on the weather like it was a fragile vase that might break under pressure. Eventually, they left. Bethany kissed her mother on the cheek with mechanical care. Carter gave a vague wave. Ellie lingered for a second longer, eyes searching, but said nothing. The front door closed. Silence returned. Marge walked to her desk, opened her visits log, and recorded the time and summary in a neat line of cursive. Across town, Carter parked outside a cafe and pulled out his phone. He scrolled until he found the number for Marge's financial advisor, one he'd saved years ago when helping her reorganize. He tapped it. Hi, I'm calling on behalf of Marjorie Delaney. I'm sorry, the receptionist interrupted. We're not authorized to speak with you. The rain had come overnight, soaking the edges of the porch and leaving the mountain air thick with petrichor. Marge stood by her front window, watching droplets slide down the glass like they were trying to get in. She held a fresh envelope from her financial advisor in one hand, the thick cardstock humming with finality. Inside, confirmation, all accounts had been retitled and secured. Full control, Marjorie Delaney, secondary signature for medical emergencies, Donald Chase. No external access granted, no shared visibility, not even for family. She exhaled slowly and set the letter on her desk, next to a manila folder labeled Phase 2. The tab peeked out like a tooth. Across town, Carter was gripping his steering wheel so tightly his knuckles paled. He just hung up with the advisor's office, again. Denied, twice. Not even an account balance. No verification that the accounts even still existed. Bethany slammed the car door as she climbed in beside him. What the hell is going on? She's locked everything, he said. We're completely shut out. Bethany stared straight ahead, jaw set. She can't do that. She just did. Marge, meanwhile, sipped her coffee at the kitchen table while Donnie installed the new doorbell camera. He stood on the porch, sleeves rolled up, fiddling with wires beneath the casing. You know this won't stop them from showing up, he called through the screen. I don't want to stop them, Marge said. I just want to see them coming. He chuckled under his breath, then drilled the final screw into place. The camera blinked red, then green. Live. Inside, Marge opened her safe. Not the one in the closet, the real one, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the pantry. She removed the will binder and moved it to a new location. A lockbox inside Donnie's attic crawlspace, climate-controlled and off-record. That same afternoon, Bethany arrived without texting. She didn't knock. Marge opened the door and stood in the frame, unmoved. Bethany's voice was sharp from the start. Why are we locked out of everything? Dad's accounts didn't do this when his mother passed. Marge didn't flinch. Because it's mine, not yours, Bethany's eyes narrowed. "You're not thinking clearly." "On the contrary," Marge replied. "I've never been clearer." Bethany stepped forward like she might force her way in, but the doorbell camera blinked once, recording every movement, every twitch of her expression. "I want access," Bethany said. "You're not entitled to it." "Carter said he'll talk to a lawyer." Marge smiled faintly. "Tell him to pick a good one." Bethany left in a fury, her footsteps pounding down the porch stairs like punctuation. The rain had started again, gentler this time, but cold. Later that evening, Carter did exactly what he promised. He sent an email with the subject line, "Notice of intent to challenge financial control." The body was short, vague legal language, implied threats, a reference to potential elder instability. Marge forwarded it to Cynthia without comment. 10 minutes later, her phone rang. "I've seen their opening move," Cynthia said. "Let him try. They don't have standing. What if they fake standing? Then we crush them with documentation. And when they push harder, we push quieter." Marge hung up, her mind already moving 2 steps ahead. At 7:45 p.m., just after sunset, there was a knock. This time, it was light. Soft, familiar. She opened the door to find Ellie standing alone, jacket soaked through at the shoulders, eyes rimmed pink. "I had to walk here," she said. "Mom thinks I'm at Sophie's." Marge stepped aside. "Come in." Ellie sat on the couch, chewing at her thumbnail. She didn't ask for tea. She didn't mention school. "They're planning something," she finally said. "A lawyer. Maybe more than one. I heard them arguing about it after dinner." Carter's serious Marge didn't speak at first. She simply looked at her granddaughter, soaked, scared, loyal. "Whatever they try," Marge said quietly, "they'll be standing on paper." "I'll be standing on stone." Ellie leaned into her. "I believe you." But belief wasn't going to be enough. The next battle had already begun. The envelope arrived via certified mail, hand-stamped with the county clerk's seal, thick with accusation. Marge opened it with a letter opener shaped like a quill, her hand steady despite the weight of the moment. Inside, a formal notice of claim. Subject: Petition for review of mental capacity. Marjorie Delaney. Filed by Bethany Harmon on behalf of family interests. The language was sterile, legal. It didn't mention soup bowls or Facebook posts or the laughter that cracked around the edges of Marge's silence. But she could see all of it hiding between the lines. She folded the letter carefully, placed it in a manila folder labeled "Offense Dressed as Concern," and called Cynthia. "She filed," Marge said. Cynthia exhaled on the other end of the line. Expected, but stupid. By midweek, Cynthia had drafted the formal response. Attached, the full evaluations from Dr. Kerr and Dr. Patel. Time-stamped, independently verified, and paired with a signed affidavit from Marge herself. Also included, a video. In it, Marge sat calmly at her dining table, her hands folded over the final draft of her trust. She read the key clauses aloud, her voice measured, confident, every syllable deliberate. "She's going to look like a fool in court," Cynthia said, "but this needs a human touch." So Marge wrote a letter. She used her favorite notepaper, the thick ivory kind with a faint border of ivy. The pen was slow in her hand, but steady enough. To the court. "My name is Marjorie Delaney. I am 74 years old. I have arthritis, not amnesia. My hands tremble, not my mind. I may move slower now, but I have never been more deliberate in my choices. The people questioning my capacity have mistaken quiet for weakness. Let this letter remind them otherwise. M.D. Donnie came by that afternoon, wearing a tweed cap and carrying his weathered leather briefcase. "Ready?" he asked. Marge folded the letter and sealed it in a navy envelope. "Be sure they read it themselves. Don't let it pass through a clerk. I'll stand there until they do," Donnie said. And he did. He drove to the courthouse in his Buick, stood in line with retirees paying property taxes and young lawyers juggling coffee cups. and handed the envelope directly to the probate assistant with a polite but unshakable stare. 2 days later, Bethany's attorney quietly withdrew from the case. No press release, no apology, just a one-line statement to the clerk. Petitioner no longer wishes to pursue the matter. Marge received the news via Cynthia, who sounded almost disappointed she didn't get to deliver a closing argument. She retreated fast, Cynthia said. I suspect the letter did it. No, Marge replied. It was the mirror. She saw herself in it. That evening, Marge sat at her desk and made a $5,000 donation to the Western North Carolina Arthritis Foundation, specifically earmarked for patient dignity programs. She submitted it in the name of Bethany Harmon. No card, no notification, just a legacy of irony stitched into public record. The next morning, the sun broke through the September clouds in slow golden streaks across the porch. Marge sat with her tea, flipping through the local paper, her joints still aching but her grip stronger somehow. The wind nudged the wind chimes beside her door, and her phone buzzed on the tray beside her mug. A text from Ellie. Ellie, they're furious, and I'm sorry. Marge stared at the screen, then typed back slowly. Let them be furious. You don't need to be sorry. But before she could hit send, another message came through. Ellie, I think they're not done. The email came at 6:14 a.m. Time-stamped, weaponized, sent from Carter's personal account, like a man dropping a match into dry grass. The subject line was, your legacy, but there was no grace in the message. This isn't dignity, Marge. It's emotional blackmail, dressed up as elder independence. You've turned a family matter into a courtroom stunt. We tried to help. You made it a battlefield. You're going to regret this. Marge stared at the screen, her teacup suspended midair. Outside, the light hadn't yet fully broken the ridge, but the sky was already brightening with the slow orange bleed of a Carolina morning. She lowered the cup, opened her documents folder, and attached a single PDF. Clause 18. All decisions final, all behavior remembered. She hit send. No greeting, no signature, no warmth. 20 minutes later, another email landed. This one from Bethany. Subject. You've broken this family. Over 1,000 words, dense with passive aggression and martyrdom. You've humiliated us. Everyone's talking. Do you know how this makes us look? You've twisted Ellie into thinking you're some kind of hero. She's a child, Mom. A child. And instead of support, you give her a trust fund to bribe her away from her parents? You could have asked what we needed. You didn't. You just decided we were your enemies. You've lost all perspective. Not once in the email. I'm sorry, not once. I was wrong. Just blame disguised as heartbreak. Control dressed in parental concern. Marge forwarded it to Cynthia with no comment. Cynthia replied in less than 10 seconds. Do not respond. That afternoon, the kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon, butter, and quiet defiance. Donnie arrived with a loaf of warm apple bread wrapped in wax paper and tied with red twine. For peace, he said, placing it on the counter, and signatures. Marge smiled as she sliced 2 thick pieces, steam curling from the soft center. There's a kind of peace that only comes after fire. They ate in silence, broken only by the creak of the porch swing outside and the occasional chirp from Donnie's wristwatch, set 10 minutes fast out of habit. Before he left, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sticky note. Found this in the mailbox this morning, he said. No return address. Just tucked in, it was Ellie's handwriting. You're the only adult who listens. Marge folded it with slow reverence and tucked it into her journal. Ellie came by later that day, quiet as ever, sketchbook clutched to her chest like a secret she wasn't ready to share. Can I stay for a bit? She asked. I don't want to go home yet. Of course, Marge said, pulling the Afghan from the arm of the couch. You want tea? Ellie nodded. And maybe, would you look at some drawings? Marge set the kettle on. I'd be honored. The sketchbook opened to pages filled with scenes that didn't flinch. One of the dinner party, drawn from memory, with faces caught mid-laugh. another of the soup bowl on the high shelf, and one more, unfinished, of Marge at her desk, writing. "You have an eye for truth," Marge said softly. Ellie looked up. "I just draw what I see." Marge touched her hand gently. "That's what makes it powerful." They stayed like that for an hour, drawing, talking about nothing and everything, until the knock came, not at the door, in the form of an envelope slid under it. Cream cardstock, gold edge, no stamp. Marge bent slowly, picked it up, opened it with a paper knife she kept near the door for situations like this. Inside, a formal letter from a probate litigation attorney out of Charlotte. Subject: Notice of intent to contest will, on behalf of Ms. Bethany Harmon. No apology, just a declaration of war. The courthouse sat still under a gray morning sky, its brick facade damp with fog and the scent of wet pavement hanging in the air. Marge stepped from Donnie's car slowly, every movement deliberate. She wore her best wool coat, hair neatly pinned, and her compression gloves, the ones with the faint floral stitching, pulled tight over her swollen knuckles. In one hand, her cane. In the other, a leather case holding her entire defense. Not for her life, but for her clarity. Donnie walked beside her without speaking, the hush between them like a shield against what waited inside. Inside courtroom 2B, Bethany sat stiff-backed, wearing a slate blazer that made her look like she was auditioning for a board seat. Carter leaned back beside her, smirking faintly, legs crossed with smug assurance. A younger attorney from Charlotte sat at their side, whispering into Bethany's ear like this was just business, strategy, optics. Marge took her place at the opposite table. Cynthia met her with a calm nod and slid her a warm mug of ginger tea in a court-approved travel cup. "You're not here to prove anything," she whispered. "Just to remind the court you already did." The judge entered, a woman in her early 60s with tired eyes and a sharp gaze. She adjusted her glasses and opened the file. Petitioner claims the decedent's mother lacked mental capacity when signing the revised will and trust, the judge said. Defense may proceed. Cynthia rose, confidence in every step. "Your Honor, we have video testimony." Signed medical assessments from 2 licensed physicians, logs of communication, witness statements, and a dated handwritten journal. The claimant's accusations are speculative, retaliatory, and unsupported by evidence. She turned and played the video. There on screen, Marge's voice filled the room. Strong, clear, reading clauses aloud, explaining her decisions. Then came the journal entries, printed pages one by one, projected onto the courtroom screen. March 8th, the dinner, the soup, the laughter, the bowl. Cynthia's voice remained steady as she narrated the timeline, methodically presenting each artifact. The email from Carter mocking her tremor, the Facebook post from Bethany, the documentation of Bethany snooping around the kitchen. Each item was a nail in the coffin of their claim. Then Marge stood. She walked slowly to the stand. No drama, just resolve. "Mrs. Delaney," the judge said, "do you understand why you're here today?" "I do," Marge replied. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean through the courtroom. "And what would you like to say in response to your daughter's claim?" Marge looked toward Bethany, then back to the judge. "I may shake," she said, "but I am not broken." Silence followed. The judge's pen paused mid-scribble. "That will be all," Marge finished. Bethany stood next, visibly rattled. Her voice cracked halfway through her prepared statement. "She's not who she used to be. She doesn't remember things right. She thinks we were trying to hurt her, but we weren't. We were just trying to help." "And did she express to you that she wanted your help?" the judge asked calmly. Bethany stammered. "Well, not directly, but—" The judge raised a hand. "That's enough." She shuffled her notes. "This court finds no basis to invalidate the revised will or trust. Mrs. Delaney's capacity is well documented. Her intentions are clear, and her documentation is, frankly, impressive." She banged the gavel once. "Motion dismissed." Will upheld Carter stood up immediately, muttering something about biased systems as he stormed out. Bethany followed, eyes glassy, heels clicking too hard against the floor as she brushed past her mother without looking at her. Ellie stayed seated. She hadn't moved the entire time. Marge approached slowly, case in one hand, envelope in the other. "For your 18th, she said softly, placing the envelope in Ellie's lap. "Don't open it yet." Ellie looked up, lips trembling. "What is it?" Marge leaned in. "A choice," she whispered. Ellie sat cross-legged on Marge's living room rug, the late afternoon sun streaking across her face as she carefully peeled back the envelope flap. Her hands moved slowly, like the paper might dissolve if rushed. Marge watched from the nearby armchair, cane resting against her knee, fingers interlaced in her lap. Her tremor had returned, mild but steady. She didn't hide it. Not anymore. Inside the envelope, a folded certificate, thick with an embossed seal, a ribbon tucked beneath its corner. Ellie unfolded it, her eyes scanning the top line first. Ellie Harmon, full tuition grant. Delaney Independent Trust for Women in the Arts. Her mouth opened slightly. "What?" Beneath the certificate lay a bundle tied in twine, a letter and a stack of faded recipe cards, edges curled and stained from decades of use. She lifted them carefully, reverent. The scent of old ink and vanilla extract clung to the paper. Marge nodded toward the letter. "Start there." Ellie unfolded it, heart in her throat. "My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, it means the court believed me, and so did you. What I've left you isn't just money. It's freedom. It's the room to choose a path without apology, without asking permission. I watched you watch them, quiet, stuck in the middle, trying to stay kind. You don't have to live in between. You can stand on your own. Grace is not weakness, and silence is not forgetfulness. You listened, and that's why you're getting everything they assumed would be theirs. These recipes are yours now too. Not just food, but moments. Make them your own. Just don't let anyone else stir your pot without asking. Love, Gran." Ellie's eyes brimmed but didn't fall. She held the letter against her chest, blinking hard. "Gran." Marge smiled, tired but proud. "They tried to rewrite my ending," she said. "I just wrote it louder." The next day, Cynthia arrived at Marge's with a secure hard drive, a rolling briefcase, and a small digital camcorder. "Today we future-proof," she said, setting up at the dining table. Together they reviewed every clues, scanned every signature, verified timestamps, and archived redundancies across 3 encrypted drives. The finalized trust documents were uploaded to both a cloud vault and Donnie's off-site safety deposit box. A second encrypted copy went into Ellie's trust folder, with access to activate on her 18th birthday. Cynthia recorded Marge reading her final living trust aloud. Voice slow, words deliberate. The tremor in her hands was visible as she held the papers, but her tone never wavered. "I, Marjorie Delaney, declare this trust the product of my full will, my full awareness, and my full intention." She paused before the final signature, her hand hovering over the page. Cynthia looked up. "You okay?" Marge nodded, her voice low. "They joked about these hands. And I use them to erase them with care." She signed the last line. The ink dragged slightly, her fingers shaking, but the name was unmistakable. Marge Delaney. Done. 1 week later, Marge made a quiet visit to the Asheville Women's Shelter. No cameras, no press. She handed them a check, the amount equaling what Bethany's share of the estate had once been. On the memo line, she wrote, "In memory of assumptions." That evening, Marge returned home to find Ellie already waiting on the porch swing, sketchbook in her lap. The late summer air had begun to shift. The crickets quieter now, the breeze carrying the first hints of coming autumn. "You okay?" Ellie asked. Marge eased into the swing beside her. "I'm ready." "For what?" "For peace." Ellie reached into her bag and pulled out a drawing. It was Marge, sitting at her desk, hands curled slightly, pen lifted, eyes forward. Behind her, instead of walls, were pages. Words and recipes, signatures and soup stains, journals and trusts, an entire life-turned fortress. "You changed everything," Ellie whispered, her voice breaking as she folded herself into her grandmother's arms. Marge held her close, her fingers shaky but certain. "Good," she whispered. "Then it was worth it." The silence arrived like snowfall, gradual, then absolute. One day the calls stopped. The text dried up. No more emails titled clarification or urgent family concerns. Bethany and Carter vanished from Marge's inbox and her front porch in equal measure, not with a grand apology or a final confrontation, but with a bitter quiet that stretched itself thin over the weeks like a film over soup left too long in the fridge. Marge didn't miss the noise. She filled the new stillness with her own rhythm. Mornings began with hot water steeped in the fresh lemon balm. Windows cracked to let in the scent of pine and last night's rain. The sound of wind against the porch screen, the ache in her knuckles, still there, still alive, was no longer a reminder of limitation, but of presence. She logged it every morning in her pain journal. 4.2, slight burn, right wrist, barometric pressure drop. Every Sunday, Ellie came walking up the driveway with a small messenger bag and a spiral notebook poking out. Always on time, always with something new drawn in the margins. They sat at the table together with fresh scones and crossword puzzles. Marge had pulled her father's old Remington typewriter out of the closet after years of storage and taught Ellie how to feed the paper through, how to line up the margins, how to punch each letter with intention. "You can't backspace this one," Marge told her with a grin. "Makes every word matter more." Ellie practiced typing out her own short stories. One was about a girl who turned her grandmother's soup recipes into spellbooks. "You always knew there was magic in soup," Marge said. Each Thursday, Donnie came by just after 10 with a newspaper tucked under one arm and a carton of eggs under the other. He cooked breakfast in Marge's kitchen like it belonged to both of them. Eggs over medium, coffee strong, toast with salted butter and homemade jam. The same routine every week, but somehow never stale. They reviewed the estate trust updates like clockwork, going over monthly allocations, digital security logs, and an absurdly detailed spreadsheet that Donnie insisted on maintaining despite Cynthia's automated backups. "I trust tech," he said, sipping his coffee, "but I also trust hard copies." The porch swing still creaked under Marge's weight in the afternoons. She never had it oiled. It was a small rebellion, that sound, her own slow, aging metronome. The mountain air curled around her, and she let it in, let it move through her like she belonged to it. Her arthritis flared on colder mornings, and whenever she overworked her hands. But she didn't hide it anymore. She didn't apologize for needing to sit down, or for moving slower, or for carrying a cane. She didn't wince in shame. She just documented the sensation, the frequency, the ebb and flow. A scientist in her own skin. The house stayed quiet, clean, peaceful, until the ding of her inbox. It was Cynthia. Subject, final confirmation, body. Estate filing complete. All terms enforced. Trust secured. Will irrevocable. Congratulations, Marge. You did it. Marge exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath for a year. She reached for her tea, cooling now, and took a sip. Outside, the sun, dipped below the tree line, golden hours spilled over her wooden floors, kissing the photos on the mantel, the stack of Ellie's typewritten pages, the locked cabinet where her documents now lived, encrypted and notarized and sealed tighter than the mouths of the people who once mocked her. The porch creaked again. Not the swing, the boards themselves. A knock followed, gentle, familiar. Marge stood slowly, sliding her cane to her side, her joints flaring as they always did at dusk. She opened the door. Ellie stood there, breathless, cheeks pink from the wind. A stack of envelopes pressed to her chest. "I just got something weird in the mail," she said. Marge stepped aside. "Come in, sweetheart," she said. "Let's see what ghosts have left us now." The mountain light filtered in soft and golden, catching on the edges of dust motes and resting gently across the armrest where Marge's hand lay, curled but calm. Her fingers didn't flutter the way they used to. The tremor still came, but now it felt quieter, more like the ticking of an old clock than a broken wire. She sat in her favorite chair by the window, the one with the quilt folded across the back and the cushion worn just right under her hips. Beside her, on the small oak-side table, sat her leather-bound journal. Its edge was tucked beneath a teacup coaster. The top corner folded to a page titled Final Entry in crisp, deliberate script. Beneath it rested the full weight of her trust folder, thick as a Bible and twice as binding, notarized, sealed, encrypted, and backed up twice. One copy lived in Donnie's safe, the other in Ellie's future. "Gran," a voice said softly. Ellie, who now insisted people call her Riley, her middle name, sat cross-legged on the rug beside the chair, sketchbook open in her lap, a ballpoint pen tucked behind her ear. Her hair had grown out, loose waves down her back, and her tone carried more confidence these days, as if the silence in the house had taught her to speak more freely. Which recipe was the one with the cinnamon trick? You know, the one that made the pie crust taste like autumn air? Marge reached slowly for the edge of her recipe tin, resting on the shelf beneath the table. She pulled it open with one hand and thumbed through the stained cards, pausing at a yellowed one with a soft curve in the corner. "This one," she said. "See that smudge? That's where I dropped cinnamon into the shortening by accident. Ruined the crust." Until it didn't, Riley grinned, copying the recipe into her sketchbook with a steady hand. "You always say that. That things don't ruin, they just change." Marge didn't respond right away. Her eyes drifted toward the window, where the porch swing creaked lazily in the breeze. The weight of time didn't sit heavy today, just familiar, like an old neighbor dropping by uninvited but not unwelcome. Donnie entered the room carrying 2 mugs of coffee and a folded off newspaper. He handed one to Marge without comment. She took it with both hands, fingers bracing the ceramic. The steam rose up, fogging her glasses briefly. He settled into the rocker across from her, stretching his legs. "You made a paper fortress," he said. Marge sipped slowly. "I didn't start out to build one." "No?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "I just wanted a line between dignity and harm," she said, "and something that lasted longer than mockery." He lifted his mug. "Well, it worked." The doorbell chimed in the background, soft, melodic. Neither of them moved. "Ignore it," Marge said. "If it's for me, they're too late." Riley looked up. "You're not going to answer." "No," Marge replied. They already had their say. She leaned forward with some effort, pulling the trust folder closer. The weight of it filled her lap, the embossed seal pressing warm against her knees. She ran a hand over the cover like it was an old quilt. "They joked about shaking hands," she said, not bitterly, just plainly. "So I shook them out." No one replied right away. There wasn't much to add. Riley closed her sketchbook and leaned into her grandmother's side. The smell of cinnamon, paper, and lemon balm filled the quiet space between them. Outside, the wind picked up just enough to rattle the doorbell chimes again. Marge's eyes fluttered shut for a moment, not from exhaustion, but satisfaction. A chapter closed without spectacle. No fireworks, no flames, just paperwork and intention. Behind her eyelids, she could still see the soup bowl on the high shelf. She smiled to herself. The memory wasn't sharp anymore. It had dulled into something useful. A hinge the whole story turned on. Her voice, when she spoke next, was low and steady. "My daughter and her husband mocked my arthritis in front of guests, so I shook them out of the will with shaking hands.